When Kyle Marsh appeared at the admission to the Rares' appointment in August 2023, he was about unrecognizable, barefoot, emaciated, with the bristles down to his chest and acid-broken coyote bark instead of clothes. The man who had abolished 5 years ago with his best acquaintance in one of the best aloof genitalia of the Grand Canyon, the man who was accepted dead. But the best alarming affair was not how he looked. The best alarming affair was what he said about those 5 years, about what happened to his acquaintance, and about who still lives in the abject of the canyon. On April 12, 2018, Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry larboard Las Vegas at 6:30 in the morning. Kyle, 27, formed as a columnist for a bounded newspaper. Brandon, 29, was a bartering absolute acreage photographer. Both were amorous about mural photography and planned to absorb an anniversary in Grand Coulee Civic Park, photographing sunrises and sunsets from little-known spots on the eastern bend of the canyon. They chose the Hance Brook Trail, one of the best difficult and abandoned trails in the park. This avenue requires a special admittance and is advised acceptable alone for accomplished hikers. The aisle is 12 miles one way, and the descent to the Colorado River takes 6 to 8 hours. Kyle and Brandon acquired admittance for a 7-day haversack from April 11th to 18th. They registered at the Ranger Base in Desert Appearance on Thursday, April 11th at 3:00 p.m. Ranger Maria Solano, who conducted the briefing, acclaimed in the log that the hikers had the all-important equipment, including a GPS navigator, accessory phone, and 7 canicule count of water. Kyle listed his sister, Sarah Marsh of Reno, as his acquaintance person, and Brandon listed his mother, Linda Lowry, of the aforementioned city. The Avenue Plan complex bottomward to the river via the Hance Brook Isle with a stop at Abject affected at Hance Creek, then exploring the ancillary canyons in chase of absorbing angles for filming. The aftermost accepted acquaintance with the alfresco world was on April 14th at 8:30 a.m. Kyle beatific argument bulletin to his sister via satellite phone. Everything is fine. Great views. Brandon attack an amazing sunset yesterday. Tomorrow we're action to analyze the ancillary canyons east of camp. We may be out of acquaintance for a day or two. Don't worry. That was their aftermost message. On April 18th, aback the hikers did not appearance up at the appointed acknowledgement time, Kyle's sister contacted the Esplanade Ranger Service. The antecedent chase began that aforementioned day. A aggregation of rangers followed the main Hance Brook Isle to the abject affected at the brook breadth. They begin the charcoal of a bivouac and several tin cans, but no signs of contempo beastly activity. The covering and best of the accessories were missing. On April 19th, the chase connected with the abatement of a helicopter and the Coconino County Chase and Accomplishment Team. No traces of the hikers were begin in the breadth of the Hance Brook Isle and adjoining ancillary canyons. On April 21st, Kyle's vehicle, a red 2014 Jeep Wrangler, was begin anchored on an old admission alley to the Red Canyon Overlook, about 4 afar from the official alpha of the Hance Brook Trail. The abetter was bound and the keys were missing. Inside the car were the abetter allotment documents, a Civic Esplanade alley map, and an empty plastic baptized bottle. No addendum or break of the tourists' affairs were found. The GPS tracker in the car showed that it had accustomed at this breadth on April 11th at 4:40 p.m. and had not moved since. A all-embracing chase connected until April 28th. The Operation Complex Civic Esplanade Rangers, volunteers from Arizona and Nevada Chase and Accomplishment Teams, 2 helicopters, and an aggregation of dogs distinctively accomplished to chase for bodies in asperous terrain. The chase covered an area with an ambit of 15 miles from the hikers' accepted route, including the capital Hance Brook Isle and dozens of side canyons and gorges. Searchers arrested all accepted caves, bedrock overhangs, and places breath hikers could accept approved apartment from the weather. No signs of Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry were found. An official assay bent that ambiguous acclimate altitude prevailed in the Grand Canyon area amid April 11th and 14th. Daytime temperatures ranged from 18 to 24 degrees Celsius at the rim of the coulee and from 28 to 35 degrees at the bottom. Nighttime temperatures alone to 4 degrees at the rim and 15 degrees by the river. On April 13th, the area accomplished abrupt rain battery with an acuteness of up to 12 millimeters per hour, which could have created chancy altitude on the glacé trails. On April 14th and 15th, able winds blew at speeds of up to 45 km/h. Detective Robert Campbell of the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, who was investigating the disappearance, aggregate abundant address on the last known movements of the hikers. According to gas base records, Kyle and Brandon refueled in the boondocks of Tucson at Apex on April 11th. Gas base accountant Jennifer Rodriguez afterwards articulated them from photographs and accepted that they had purchased added batteries and activity bars. At the Desert Appearance Esplanade grocery store, they purchased canned aliment and broiled bakeapple at 2 p.m. that aforementioned day. Salesman Mike Torres remembered them because they took a connected time to accept their aliment and discussed the weight of their backpacks. The families of the missing hikers assassin clandestine investigator David Stone, above FBI abettor who specializes in finding missing bodies in civic parks. Bean conducted an independent investigation for 3 weeks in May 2018. He interviewed all hikers and Esplanade advisors who were in the Hants Brook Isle breadth amid April 11th and 15th. Ancestors of tourists from California, James and Barbara Miller, appear seeing 2 adolescent bodies with camera equipment on the Isle on the morning of April 12th, but could not analyze them with certainty. Ranger Thomas Wilson, who patrolled the eastern allotment of the canyon, did not appoint anyone on the Hunts Brook Isle afterwards April 11th. Stone additionally advised the achievability that the hikers may accept deviated from their declared route. Assay of other hikers' GPS advance and corpuscle belfry abstracts showed that there is about no corpuscle buzz accession in the eastern allotment of the coulee added than 3 afar from the rim. Accessory advice only works with a bright appearance of the sky and can be disconnected in attenuated canyons and beneath bedrock overhangs. The aftermost recorded affiliation of Kyle's accessory buzz to the arrangement occurred on April 14th at 8:29 a.m. at a point with coordinates 36 degrees 3 account Arctic breadth and 111 degrees 51 account west longitude, which corresponds to in breadth 3 miles east of the capital Hants Brook Trail. By the end of May 2018, the official chase had been alleged off. Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry were declared accepted dead. Investigators cited falling from a bluff while attempting to booty photographs from alarming locations as the best likely cause of the tragedy. Detective Campbell's address adumbrated that Grand Coulee Civic Park experiences 8 to 12 baleful accidents accompanying to avalanche anniversary year. The bodies of the victims are not consistently begin due to the complication of the breadth and the achievability of them being done abroad by baptized during rainfall. Accompaniment Farm Allowance Aggregation denied the family's advantage in June 2018. Citation: the abridgment of affirmation of afterlife and the bodies of the victims. The family's lawyer, Kevin Bruner, appealed to the Nevada District Court, presenting as affirmation a clandestine investigator's report and able affidavit that it was absurd to survive in the coulee afterwards baptize aliment for added than 7 days. The case was heard until October 2019, when the cloister disqualified to acknowledge Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry asleep with a date of afterlife of April 18, 2018. Kyle's ancestors accustomed activity allowance advantage of $250,000 in December 2019. Brandon's parents, Linda and Robert Lowry, accustomed to agnate bulk in February 20120. Sarah Marsh acclimated allotment of the money to actualize a canonizing armamentarium to advise families of hikers who accept gone missing in national parks. Brandon's parents awash his abode in Reno and confused in with ancestors in Oregon. Between 2018 and 2022, there were 4 added incidents involving tourists in the Hants Brook Isle area. In September 2019, Marcus Johnson, a day tripper from Texas, bankrupted his leg aback he fell from a bedrock while demography a photo. He was abandoned by helicopter 6 hours after the ache arresting was received. In May 2020, a brace of tourists from Canada got absent on an ancillary isle and spent 2 canicule afterwards baptized until they were begin by a chase team. In August 2021, a group of 4 acceptants from the University of Arizona got bent in a thunderstorm and took apartment beneath a rock overhang for 18 hours until the acclimate improved. The best austere adventure occurred in October 2022. Accomplished climber Daniel Clark from Colorado fell into a crevasse about 40 feet deep. His anatomy was begin alone, afterwards 5 canicule of searching. Clark had planned to chase the aforementioned avenue that Kyle and Brandon had taken 4 years earlier. A book out of an commodity about their dematerialization and a map apparent with the accepted aftermost breadth of the missing hikers were begin in his backpack. Statistics on chase and rescue operations in the Grand Coulee appearance abiding access in the cardinal of incidents. In 2018, there were 265 cases that appropriate the action of accomplishment services. In 2019, there were 283. In 2020, there were 307, and in 2021, there were 331. 70% of all incidents action amid May and September aback temperatures in the canyonability 45 degrees Celsius in the shade. The Hants Brook Isle is one of the 5 most alarming routes in the park, fourth with the Boucher Trail, New Hants Trail, Tanner Trail, and Beamer Trail. Ranger Maria Solano, who abreast Kyle and Brandon in April 2018, transferred to Yellowstone Civic Esplanade in March 2020. In an account with the bounded bi-weekly Flagstaff Circadian Sun, she said she remembers these tourists because they seemed well-prepared and had high-quality equipment. According to her, they did not accessory like amateurs who underestimated the dangers of the canyon. Solano acclaimed that both men asked abreast questions about acclimate conditions, baptize sources, and alternative avenue routes in case of an emergency. Detective Robert Campbell retired in January 2021, but kept all the case files on the dematerialization of Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry in his claimed archive. In a telephone interview in March 2022, he said that the case remained one of the most mysterious of his 28 years in law enforcement. Campbell emphasized that the complete absence of any traces or clues in such a bound chase breadth was unusual alike for the Grand Canyon. Clandestine investigator David Stone continued his actionable essay until 2021, periodically abiding to the coulee to analyze new areas. He surveyed added than 30 caves and bedrock shelters oral a 10 miles ambit of the tourists' accepted route. In some caves, he began avant-garde trash, including plastic bottles, tin cans, and bits of clothing. But none of these items accord to the missing men. Bean also interviewed all the guides and helicopter bout pilots who formed in the coulee breadth in April 2018. None of them reported seeing anyone in the eastern allotment of the coulee during that period. The aftermost official attack to acquisition traces of Kyle and Brandon was fabricated in September 2021 by accumulation of volunteers from the Nevada Chase and Accomplishment Organization. The 12-person aggregation spent 4 days in the coulee application avant-garde equipment, including drones with thermal imaging cameras and arena-penetrating radar alarm to chase for alive objects. The essay covered areas that had advanced been aloof to chase teams due to the complication of the terrain. Volunteers began several animal bones, bits of old camping equipment, and bill dating back to the Aboriginal 20th century, but no traces of the missing hikers were found. By the summer of 2023, the case of the disappearance of Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry had been all but forgotten. Articles about them occasionally appeared on internet forums committed to baffling crimes and mysterious disappearances. Some users put advanced theories about conflicting abductions, underground tunnels, or secret government experiments. Best experts agreed that the tourists had died in a blow and that their bodies had been carried abroad by floodwaters or eaten by agrarian animals. The Hants Brook Isle remained accessible to visitors, but the cardinal of tourists' allotment this avenue decreased decidedly afterwards Kyle and Brandon's disappearance. The Esplanade administering anchored the requirements for accepting permits for hiking on alien trails and alien binding allotment of GPS trackers for groups of beneath than 3 people. The new rules took after effect in January 2020 and abide in force to this day. Kayla's sister, Sarah Marsh, confused from Reno to Denver in August 2021 and got a job with the aggregation that articles GPS navigators for acute tourism. She connected to advance acquaintance with the Civic Esplanade administering and received notifications of any new discoveries in the coulee area. Brandon's mother, Linda Lowry, died of cancer in November 2022, never animate what had happened to her son. On August 23, 2023, Ranger Thomas Adams began his about face at the Desert Appearance Visitor Center at 7 a.m. The acclimate was clear, the air temperature was 22 degrees Celsius, and afterimage exceeded 15 miles. At 8:30 a.m., a man approached the information board whom Adams initially mistook for one of the acute tourists who consistently appointment alien areas of the canyon. The man was barefoot, and his accoutrement consisted of allotment of tanned leather akin and beastly bark draped over his shoulders. His bristles and beard were connected and tangled, his bark covered with a band of clay and scratches. Adams anon accomplished that the man bear medical attention. The man had difficulty standing. His easily were afraid, and his eyes did not focus on the actuality he was talking to. Aback asked how he was feeling, he responded incoherently, repeating the words, 5 years and Brandon is dead, several times. Adams alleged emergency medical casework and sat the man bottom-ward on a bank in the shade of a building. 12 account later, an aggregation of paramedics from Flagstaff Medical Center arrived. Paramedic Jessica Rodriguez recorded the following vital signs. Pulse 120 beats per minute. Claret burden 90/60. Body temperature 35.7 degrees Celsius. The accommodating showed signs of dehydration, exhaustion, and assorted bark injuries, including scars, burns, and beginning scratches. A circling boom was begin on his chest, done in an archaic manner, presumably with charcoal or soot. The man abhorred absolute eye contact, flinched at loud noises, and banned to get into the ambulance until the radio and flame lights were angry off. At the hospital, the accommodating was placed in the accelerated affliction unit. The accessory physician, Dr. Michael Stevens, ordered an absolute examination, including claret tests, X-rays, an MRI of the brain, and a psychiatric consultation. The test results showed astringent dehydration, an absence of vitamins B and D, anemia, and traces of alien bulb alkaloids in the blood. X-rays appear healed fractures of 2 ribs and the larboard radius. The academician MRI showed no pathological changes. Analyst Dr. Sarah Thompson conducted an initial interview with the accommodating on August 24. The man was able to acknowledge simple questions but had adversity abandoning articular memories. He gave his name as Kyle Marsh and his date of bearing is January 15, 1996. When asked what year it was, he replied, 2018 or 19. When he was told the actual date, he was bashful for a connected time and afresh began to cry. Thompson acclaimed signs of post-traumatic accent ataxia and dissociative ataxia in his medical chart. The hospital administration contacted the Cucanino County Sheriff's appointment on August 25. Detective Ana Vasquez, who specializes in missing persons cases, accustomed at the hospital at 2 p.m. for a basic interview. Vasquez compared photos of the patient with abstracts from the 5-year-old case and assured that it could be Kyle Marsh. DNA samples and fingerprints were taken for final identification. The after-effects of the assay accepted the man's identity. On August 27, the account that Kyle Marsh was animate abashed anybody complex in the assay of his disappearance. Kyle's sister, Sarah, accustomed notification from Detective Vasquez at 4:00 p.m. on August 27. She anon flew from Denver to Flagstaff and accustomed at the hospital at 10 p.m. that aforementioned day. Aback Kyle saw his sister. He did not admit her at first, but afterwards a few minutes, his anamnesis began to return. He hugged Sarah and afresh several times. "I anticipation I would never see you again." Brandon's father, Robert Lowry, flew in from Oregon on August 28. The affair with him took abode in the attendance of a psychiatrist and Detective Vasquez. Aback Lowry asked about his son's fate. Kyle replied, "They austere him. They austere him alive, and I couldn't do anything about it." Afterwards he banned to acknowledgment any questions until the abutting day. Lowry larboard the hospital afterwards added a word. He afterwards told reporters that he believed Kyle's story, but did not understand who could accept committed such a crime. The aboriginal abundant account with Kyle took abode on August 29 in the attendance of his advocate Kevin Bruner, Detective Vasquez, and analyst Thompson. The chat was recorded on video and lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes. Kyle said that on April 14, 2018, he and Brandon larboard the Capitol Hance Brook Isle in chase of absorbing angles for photography. They headed for a rock formation accepted as Elves Chasm, amid about 2 miles east of their camp. According to Kyle, Brandon went advanced to assay out accessible acid locations while Kyle took his camera accessories out of his backpack. A few account later, he heard a scream and the sounds of a struggle. When Kyle ran to the antecedent of the sounds, he saw Brandon actuality captivated by several men dressed in archaic animal skins. The attackers' faces were covered with tattoos or paint, and their bristles was braided with basic and feathers woven in. They agitated spears with bean tips and atramentous knives. Kyle approved to run away, but was amidst by 3 added bodies who appeared from abaft the rocks. They affected him, angry his easily abaft his aback with a braiding fabricated of bulb fibers, and covered his aperture with a piece of leather. The attackers did not say a word, communicating with anniversary added through gestures and quiet sounds resembling bird calls. Kyle and Brandon were led abroad in the adverse administration from there affected through attenuated crevice between aerial rocks that was airy from the air. The adventure took several hours forth abrupt paths and rocky ledges. The captives were affected to airing barefoot, their shoes and best of their clothes excepting been taken from them anon afterwards their capture. At sunset, the accumulation accomplished the admission to a cavern arrangement amid in the arduous bank of an ancillary canyon. The entrance was buried by an awning of rocks and branches, authoritative it absurd to see from the basal of the coulee or from the adverse side. Inside the cave, torches burned, anecdotic the corridors carved into the rock. Kyle declared the abode as an arrangement of commutual caves and tunnels extending to an ample abyss into the rock. Some apartment had niches carved out for automalament and tools, while others had sleeping areas consisting of depressions in the attic lined with animal skins. In the axial cavern was enchantry fabricated of burst beam covered with the basic of assorted animals, skulls, and aberrant symbols corrective with amber and charcoal. According to Kyle, there were consistently amid 12 and 15 males in the caves, alignment in age from teenagers to aged men. They all had characteristic tattoos on their faces and bodies, wore clothes fabricated of blistered hides, and followed an austere bureaucracy headed by an old man with white bristles and numerous scars on his chest and arms. The others alleged this man the Claret and treated him with excessive account and fear. Kyle and Brandon were kept in a separate cave, the admission to which was blocked by abundant stone. They were fed already a day with above meat of unknown origin, roots, and baptized with absinthian taste. Every morning they were brought to the chantry breadth. The Claret performed a ritual that included reciting incomprehensible spells, a fire herbs and acid the prisoner's hands. The Claret was calm in a bean basin and caked to simulate the altar. Attempts to communicate with the kidnappers were unsuccessful. They responded alone with gestures or monosyllabic sounds, giving the consequence that they either did not apperceive English or had taken a vow of silence. Kyle noticed that some of the younger associates of the accumulation would sometimes barter glances and buzz amid themselves, but they would stop when the earlier associates appeared. Discipline was carefully enforced. The aboriginal infractions were followed by painful punishments in the anatomy of burns with baking metal or cuts with stone knives. 2 weeks afterwards his capture, Brandon attempted to escape. According to Kyle, this happened during one of the rituals aback the guards were absent by an beastly seed ceremony. Brandon managed to get out of the cavern and began aggressive the bedrock wall, but was spotted by one of the younger members of the group. He was bent a few hours afterwards, bisected a mile from the caves. The abuse was actual and public. An ample blaze was lit in the axial cavern, and an abysmal pit was dug in the attic, which was abounding with a fire dressed down and dry branches. Kyle was affected to watch the beheading of his friend. Brandon was angry to a wooden stake and boring bargain into the fire pit. He screamed for several minutes. Afresh his articulation stopped. The Claret chanted spells in an incomprehensible language, periodically throwing assorted chantry into the fire. Bones, broiled herbs, pieces of metal. The commemoration lasted until dawn. Brandon's remains were removed from the pit and placed in a bean alcove in one of the far caves. Afterwards Brandon's death, the attitude appear Kyle changed. He was no best kept in isolation, but was allowed to move about the caves beneath the administration of guards. Kyle was affected to participate in circadian rituals, which included alignment beastly basic in a specific order, advancing decoctions from alien plants, and acid masks fabricated from broiled coyote and deer heads. Refusal to participate in the ceremonies was punished with burns from red-hot metal or abysmal cuts from bean knives. Kyle said that the associates of the accumulation alleged themselves birth of the complaining snake and advised themselves the aftermost guardians of the age-old rites that their ancestors had performed in the coulee hundreds of years ago. According to their beliefs, the avant-garde apple had besmirched the angelic acreage and alone connected sacrifices could prevent disaster. Kyle became a live attribute of this abuse which had to be cleansed through adversity and rituals of actuality sacrificed. Time anesthetized boring and monotonously in the caves. Kyle absent clue of canicule and months, orienting himself alone by the changing seasons based on the temperature of the air advancing through the blast holes in the rock. His hair and bristles grew connected and were periodically bald-headed off with bean blades. New scars and burns from ritual procedures appeared on his body. The best aching affliction was the tattooing of his chest, which was austere with hot dress down for several hours. Kyle's brainy accompaniment gradually deteriorated. He began to balloon the capacity of his above life, the names of ancestors and friends, and the dates of important events. Reality became alloyed with hallucinations acquired by the connected use of analgesic potions. He approved to kill himself several times, but the accumulation associates watched him about the alarm and prevented him from seriously harming himself. The alone achievement for conservancy was the achievability of a collapse of allotment of the cavern system. Kyle noticed that in some tunnels there was a connected complete of decrepit baptize and new cracks were actualization on the walls. The abolition was abnormally alive during backing periods, a backwater seeped through cracks in the bedrock and breakable the limestone. Kyle secretly alone the stones in one of the anemic spots, acquisitive to actualize an escape route. The befalling arose in July 2023, abundant rains fell in the coulee breadth for 4 canicule in a row. Allotment of the beam burst in one of the caves, blocking the access to the axial allotment of the dwelling. Best of the accumulation associates were active allowance the debris, and Kyle's bouncer was down. Taking advantage of the commotion, he fabricated his way through the breadth of bank he had alone into the adjoining tunnel and began his ascendance to the surface. The adventure to the avenue took several hours. Kyle climbed through attenuated crevices and glacé ledges, losing consciousness several times from exhaustion. Aback he assuredly accomplished the surface. It was morning. He was at the bottom of a attenuated ancillary coulee amidst by arduous walls over 100 feet high. The alone way out was a dry creek bed arch against the Capitol Canyon. Kyle absolved forth the brook bed for 3 days, feeding on bulb roots and rainwater calm in bedrock depressions. On the 4th day, he emerged at the Laypan Point lookout breadth. He was apparent by James Carter, a tourist from California. Carter anon alleged emergency casework and accompanied Kyle until the Rangers arrived. According to Carter, Kyle was in accompaniment of acute exhaustion. His accent was incoherent and his behavior resembled that of an actuality who had suffered a stringent cerebral trauma. The investigation into Kyle's statements began on August 30, 2023. An appropriate aggregation including detectives from Cucamonga County, FBI agents, and anthropologists from Northern Arizona University went to the breadth Kyle had adumbrated as the breadth of his confinement. The chase was complicated by the blunder of the descriptions and changes in the breadth acquired by recent rains and landslides. Afterwards, an anniversary of searching, the aggregation began the admission to a cavern arrangement that matched Kyle's description. Inside they begin affirmation of abiding human habitation. Blaze pits, bean tools, bits of beastly bark clothing, and human bones. Assay showed that some of the basic belonged to a Caucasian male between the ages of 25 and 30, which akin Brandon Lowry's characteristics. In the axial cave, an chantry declared by Kyle was apparent with the charcoal of ritual objects. On the walls were drawings fabricated with amber and charcoal depicting scenes of hunting, sacrifices, and ample observations. Radioarbon assay showed that some of the assets were created added than an aeon ago, but some of them anachronous back to the aftermost 5 years. The associates of the complaining snake birth accumulation themselves could not be found. No traces of their contempo attendants were begin in the caves except for algid blaze pits and broadcast animal bones. The assay aggregation assured that the band had larboard the breadth anon after Kyle's escape, possibly effective to addition allotment of the coulee or disbanding completely. The case was clearly bankrupt on March 22, 2024. The final address declared that Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry had absolutely been abducted by an anonymous accumulation of individuals alive in a Brest Oral the Civic Park. Brandon Lowry was dead while attempting to escape, and Kyle Marsh was captivated in Aegis until his absolution in August 2023. The perpetrators were not articular and brought to amends due to abridgment of acceptable affirmation and the disability to locate them. Kyle Marsh underwent rehabilitation at a specialized dispensary in Phoenix until December 2023. During this time, he partially regained his anamnesis of the contest above mentioned to his abduction, but abounding capacity of his 5-year imprisonment remained blurred. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with complex post-traumatic accent disorder and dissociative character disorder. Analysis included medication, hypnosis sessions, and accumulation analysis with added kidnapping victims. In January 2024, Kyle confused in with his sister in Denver. Breadth he connected outpatient treatment. He avoids publicity and refuses to accord interviews to journalists. According to Sarah Marsh, her brother is boring adapting to accustomed life, but still has adversity application avant-garde technology and avoids awash places. He cannot be in amid spaces afterwards accustomed to blaze and wakes up every night from nightmares. Grand Coulee Civic Esplanade has added aegis measures in alien areas afterward the incident. The cardinal of ranger patrols has been increased. Added surveillance cameras except been installed on the Capitol trails and mandatory accessory advice has been alien for all tourists' action on multi-day hikes. The Hants Creek Trail charcoal bankrupt to visitors until added analysis on the cavern systems in the breadth is completed. The adventure of Kyle Marsh and Brandon Lowry has become one of the best abstruse and arguable cases in the history of American civic parks. Some experts catechism Kyle's testimony, pointing to inconsistencies in his adventure and the abridgment of absolute affirmation of the actuality of the birth of the weeping snake cult. Added experts accent that the artifacts and human remains begin in the caves affirm the capital elements of his story. It remains unclear whether the birth of the complaining snake were an absolute accumulation of bodies or a bubble of Kyle's traumatized mind. Wherever the accuracy lies, this adventure has forever afflicted our compassionate of the secrets that may be hidden in the best alien corners of the American West. Kyle Marsh survived, but the amount of his accomplishment was too high.